Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something, something a little different. We aren't just summarizing a book today, we're actually stepping into a time machine. So I want you to just close your eyes for a second, unless you're driving, obviously. Please keep your eyes open if you are. But picture a specific moment in time.
We're going back to the mid-60s for this one.
Exactly. It's Monday, March 21st, 1966. It's right around 9 o'clock at night. We're in Elmira, New York. It's quiet, it's dark outside, and we're just sitting in the front room of this very modest house belonging to a couple named Jane Roberts and Robert Butts.
A setting that really on the surface seems completely ordinary. Domestic,
Yeah.
just a husband and wife sitting in their living room.
Right, but the energy in that room is, it's anything but ordinary. We are about to witness session 243 of the early sessions, book 6 of Seth material. And for those of you who might be new to this, Jane Roberts is the medium in this scenario. Seth refers to her as Ruburt, and her husband Rob is the scribe taking the dictation. Seth calls him Joseph, and tonight the vibe in that room is this weird mix of
It's like a blend of the X-Files and a sitcom about
Yeah,
your friends flaking on dinner plans.
Yes, that is a surprisingly accurate description. It's super casual, but it's chilling, and at times it's actually really funny.
But before we completely unlock the door to that living room, we do have some mandatory housekeeping to get out of the way.
We do. We are diving deep into session 243 of the early sessions, book 6 of Seth material, which was recorded on March 21st, 1966. And we need to declare right up front that this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Exactly. We're here to explore the ideas, the history, and the actual mechanics of what happened in that room. And it is so important to give full credit where it's due to the New Awareness Network. They are the publisher who keeps this incredible material alive.
Absolutely. If what we talk about today sparks that curiosity in you, and trust me, it will if you want to see the raw data for yourself, we highly encourage you to study the Seth material books. You should visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/that-early-sessions, because there is honestly nothing quite like reading the original transcripts.
We are really just the guides here. The actual territory, the map, is in those books.
Okay, so let's set the scene properly now. It's 9:00 p.m. Jane and Rob are waiting. They've got the lights set up. Rob has his notepad ready. They're expecting a friend of theirs, Peggy Gallagher, to come over and take some photos of Jane while she's in her trance state.
But the doorbell doesn't ring.
No show. Peggy has completely flaked. And I feel like you, me, everyone listening, we've all been there, right? You clean the house, you put out the good snacks, and then just silence. It's annoying.
It is annoying. But in this specific case, that annoyance is mixed with this very strange realization for them, because this flake wasn't entirely unexpected.
And this is where the whole psychic detective element of this deep dive really kicks in. Because apparently in the previous session they had, Seth, the entity, speaking through Jane, had actually made a prediction about this exact night.
He did. Seth had warned them that Peggy likely wouldn't make it. He told them there was a, quote, disturbance at her workplace. She worked at a local newspaper. And he even pinned the time of this disturbance down to around 3:00 p.m.
Now, I gotta play the skeptic here for just a second. Because disturbance at work is a pretty vague statement. I mean, that sounds like a daily horoscope. You will face a challenge today. Who doesn't have some kind of disturbance at work?
That is a totally fair critique. Disturbance is what we'd call a Barnum statement. It's something general enough that it could apply to almost anyone. But Rob, being the incredibly meticulous researcher that he was, he didn't just accept that vagueness, he actually called Peggy up to verify it. And the details he got back were way more specific than just a general bad day at the office.
So what actually happened at the paper?
Well, it turns out there was a massive blow-up, a full-on shouting match between a manager and a city editor. It was this huge drama that actually resulted in a suspension. It really shook up the entire staff. So the emotional weight of the event was significant. It wasn't just the jammed copy machine.
Okay, so Seth nailed the event itself. A fight, a suspension, high emotional drama.
He nailed the event, yeah, but here is where it gets super nuanced and fascinating. He missed the timing. Seth had predicted this altercation happened on a Wednesday, but when Rob checked, Peggy confirmed the fight actually happened on Thursday, March 17th.
So he was off by a full day.
Exactly. And honestly, this is what I love about these early sessions. If you were faking this, or if you were a fraud trying to sell this perfect prophecy, you would just gloss over that error. You'd edit it out of the transcript. But Rob leaves it in. It shows the static in the signal, so to speak.
It's like tuning an old AM radio in your car. You get the song, you can hear the melody, but sometimes there's just a hiss and a pop of static.
Precisely. And Seth actually discusses this later, how time is a physical construct that doesn't really exist in his reality the way it does in ours. So pinning down Wednesday versus Thursday is surprisingly difficult for him. It's like asking us to describe a color we can't see, but the emotional impact, the actual reason Peggy didn't come over, which was the lingering fallout from this chaos he got, that entirely accurate.
So Peggy is a no-show. It's just Jane and Rob sitting in the room alone. Jane goes into her trance state. And Seth essentially decides, well, since our guest isn't here, let's just try an experiment.
And this is exactly where the session takes a turn into the truly chilling.
He uses this phrase that I absolutely love. He says he wants to try throwing our net of awareness in a large circle, so to speak, to see what we could catch.
The net of awareness. Just pause on that image for a second. It implies that consciousness isn't just this thing locked inside your skull. It's something you can actively cast out, like a fisherman throwing a net into the dark ocean.
But the thing is, when you cast a net into the ocean, you don't just catch the prize tuna. You catch seaweed. You catch old boots. You catch completely random debris.
Exactly. And that is exactly what happens here. Seth isn't targeting a specific person or a specific event. He's literally just seeing what is floating in the psychic ether of Elmira, New York at 9:00 p.m. on a Monday.
And the catch is, it's bizarre. It is so disjointed.
It's totally fragmented. He just starts getting these random data points. He mentions the name Marguerite. He picks up on some sort of health crisis involving a doctor with the initials RG.
And then the food additive. This part made me actually laugh out loud reading it. He says monosodium. And then he's clearly struggling. He's grasping for a word that starts with G.
And Rob, who is writing all this down in shorthand, immediately thinks glutamate. Monosodium glutamate.
MSG. In 1966. So what are we even saying here? Was someone in the neighborhood just cooking Chinese takeout?
It's very possible. Or maybe someone was reading a food label in a grocery store nearby, or someone was having a mild allergic reaction to it. The point isn't the MSG itself, right? The point is the absolute randomness of the data. It shows that when you drop the normal filters of the conscious mind, you are just bombarded with information.
It's like opening up your social media feed and just refreshing the timeline. You see a political rant, then a picture of a cat, then a recipe for soup, and then a celebrity gossip story, all in the exact same second. It's overwhelming.
That is a perfect analogy. And normally, our physical brains block all of that out just so we can function and walk across the room without falling over. Seth is voluntarily lowering Jane's shield to show Rob exactly what's out there in the background noise.
But then, amidst the MSG and the Marguerites, he catches something dark, something that genuinely scared Jane.
Yes. They take a brief break in the session. Jane snaps out of the trance. She's resting, maybe having a cigarette, just staring at the floor. And suddenly a word just hits her conscious mind.
Mine.
M-I-N-E.
Mine.
But she knows instantly it doesn't mean possession. It's not someone saying this is mine.
No, she describes it as a very vivid visual.
She interprets mine as an underground shaft, a deep, dark hole in the earth, a grave.
That gave me serious goosebumps when I was reading it. She's just sitting in her safe, warm living room, and bam, this visceral image of a grave overlays her reality. It really highlights that this isn't just some fun parlor game. When you open that door, you really don't know who or what is standing on the other side.
And it raises that crucial question of filtration again. We filter this stuff out for a very good reason. To see a grave suddenly overlaying your living room floor is completely destabilizing to the human ego.
Which leads us perfectly into the really deep part of this deep dive. Because Seth doesn't just do the parlor trick, he actually stops to explain the magic behind it. He starts breaking down exactly how Jane perceived that grave, or the MSG for that matter.
Right, he gets into the mechanics of what he calls inner data versus outer data. And this is really essential Seth philosophy if you want to understand how any of this works.
Okay, let's unpack this because the language can get a little dense. Outer data is the easy stuff, right? Like, I see the microphone in front of me, I hear your voice, I feel the chair I'm sitting in.
Correct. Your physical body is essentially a machine that is perfectly designed to perceive outer data. You have eyes for light waves, ears for sound waves. The translation is entirely seamless. You don't have to consciously think about seeing a chair. You just see it.
But inner data, that's the telepathic stuff, the psychic stuff.
It's telepathy, it's clairvoyance, it's even the subconscious knowledge of your own cells. Seth says the body is constantly acting on this inner knowledge all the time. But for the ego, the conscious part of you that says, I am me to actually notice it, A complex translation has to happen.
A translation.
Think of it like a computer. The core of the computer runs on binary code, right? Ones and zeros. That is the inner data. It's pure, raw, unfiltered information. But if you just looked at a monitor full of ones and zeros, you wouldn't know what to do with it. You couldn't read an email in binary.
Right. I need an operating system. I need a visual icon to click on.
Exactly. Your mind creates a desktop icon. Seth calls this a pseudosense impression. The mind takes that raw, telepathic, non-physical data and hastily dresses it up as a physical sense. A smell, a voice, or a picture in your mind's eye.
So when Jane saw that grave, there wasn't a literal grave buried under her floorboards.
Not physically, no. She received a raw packet of information about death, or perhaps profound depth, and her mind instantly translated into the visual image of a mine shaft so her conscious ego could somewhat comprehend it.
But Seth says this translation process is really hard to do cleanly. He says, and I want to quote this exactly from the text because it's so important, "It is simpler to translate information from the outer environment into sense data. It is more difficult to translate inner data in this manner. Why is it so much harder?"
Because of what Seth refers to as the illusion of continuity.
Explain that for us.
Well, if you look at the wall of this room, and then you close your eyes for 10 seconds and you open them and look back, the wall is still right there.
Hopefully.
Right. Physical objects are stable. You can check them against the passage of time. They persist. But inner data, like a sudden psychic hunch or a vivid dream, is flashy. It's instantaneous. It doesn't just sit still on a table waiting to be examined. By the time your physical brain tries to dress it up as a physical image, the actual data stream might have already shifted or vanished.
That makes so much sense. That totally explains why dreams are so incredibly slippery. You wake up and you remember this intense feeling, or maybe a specific color or a face. But the second you try to actually tell your partner about it over coffee, the logic just completely falls apart.
Precisely. Seth says psychic data and dreams are built from the exact same raw material. They are symbolic constructions built from scratch by the personality to make sense of deep inner knowledge. We are constantly trying to force a non-physical square peg into a physical round hole.
Which perfectly explains the errors. That's why Seth got monosodium but couldn't quite form the word glutamate clearly. The raw signal was absolutely there, but the translation software in Jane's brain glitched out, trying to find the physical word for it.
Exactly. The translation is where the error lies, not necessarily in the perception of the event itself.
Speaking of translation errors and some wild successes, let's move to the part of the session that feels a bit...
I love the envelope experiments in these books. It is the ultimate put your money where your mouth is test for Seth.
Just to set this up for you listening, Rod would routinely take a random object. It could literally be anything. A utility bill, a leaf from the yard, a weird rock, and he would seal it inside a thick manila envelope. He wouldn't tell Jane what it was. Seth then had to describe what was inside that envelope while Jane was in her trance.
It's double blind, essentially.
Yeah.
Jane doesn't know. Seth has to figure it out.
So in session 243, the target object hidden in the envelope is an insurance receipt. It's this boring, standard green piece of paper for a package they had sent to a guy named Dr. Instream, and it's dated July 1965.
Okay, so visualize that. A simple green slip of paper, got some typed text on it, maybe a postal stamp.
Now let's look at Seth's pseudo-sense impressions of this paper, because he doesn't just come out and say, oh, it's a receipt. He starts giving Rob these weird, highly fragmented clues.
He starts with the number 9.
Now, the session itself started at 9:00 p.m. Rourke actually thought that was a bit of a cop-out.
And maybe it was. Or maybe Seth was just picking up on the dominant number floating in the consciousness of the room, the time on the clock they'd been staring at. But then he gets much more specific. He says, something spilled.
Something spilled. Now, this is where the intense detective work comes in for Jane and Rob. They have to rack their brains. This receipt was for a tape recording they mailed to Dr. Instream, and they suddenly realized that the specific tape in question was recorded over at the Gallagher's house months ago, where they vaguely remembered someone knocking over and spilling a drink.
It sounds like a huge stretch, right? But think about how human memory actually works. If I ask you to remember a boring dinner party from 5 years ago, you probably won't remember the exact conversation you had about the weather, but you will definitely remember the waiter dropping a tray of glasses.
You remember the emotional spike.
Exactly. Seth is navigating this inner data by emotional landmarks. A spilled drink is a moment of surprise. And oops, it leaves a psychic mark on the event that the receipt represents.
Then he says, a motor.
Well, the receipt was for a tape recording. The reel-to-reel tape recorder has a motor. That's a functional association.
Okay, I'll give him the motor. But here's the one that really made me stop reading and say, okay, that's real. He says, Elmira, New York.
Direct hit. That was stamped right on the physical receipt.
And then he says, foreheads.
Rob was initially confused by that. He thought maybe Seth meant coins, like heads or tails.
Yeah.
But then he did the math on the memory. When that receipt was generated, when the package was actually being prepared at the house, there were exactly 4 people in the room. Jane, Rob, Peggy, and Peggy's husband, Bill. 4 heads.
But the visual that really stands out to me, and again fits this slightly spooky vibe we're talking about, is the dark door.
Yes. Seth says he sees a door which is dark or opens into darkness.
Rob knew almost immediately what this meant.
He interpreted it as the actual physical layout of the Gallagher's house. There's this long hallway leading from their living room straight back to the kitchen. On the specific night they made that tape, the living room they were sitting in was dark, but the kitchen light was left on. So if you look down the hall, it looked like this dark rectangular tunnel.
It's like Seth is actively remote viewing the memory of the room where the object was created rather than just reading the piece of paper currently sitting in the envelope.
That is a brilliant distinction. He's not using Superman X-ray vision to read the envelope. He's tuning into the entire history of the object. He's seeing the people who touched it, the room it was sitting in, the emotions surrounding it.
He also describes the geometry of the paper. He talks about seeing vertical and horizontal black lines. If you look at an old 1960s insurance receipt, that is exactly what the printed borders look like, a grid.
So he gets the form right. But, and here's that translation glitch coming back, he kept insisting to Rob that the paper was white.
And it was actually green.
It's a color distortion. He got the shape with the lines, the location with Elmira, the people with the 4 heads, but the color. The desktop icon just booted up in the wrong shade.
It really validates the idea that this is a massive struggle for them. It's not a crystal clear 4K video stream from the other side. It's a messy, reconstructive process.
Absolutely. It takes immense energy to pull this data through.
Before we leave the fun and games of the envelope, we have to mention the Doctor in Stream side quest. Who even is this guy?
Dr. InStream was a psychology researcher they were briefly collaborating with. They would occasionally try to check in on him psychically, just to verify their remote viewing data with a neutral third party. In this particular session, Seth starts describing a toothbrush in relation to him.
A toothbrush. Okay, kind of random.
But he specifically says the toothbrush is being used for cleaning something else.
Which is such a mundane, incredibly specific detail. I mean, who hasn't used an old, busted toothbrush to clean bathroom grout or jewelry or scrub a carburetor?
It implies a very specific, non-standard action. He also mentioned seeing a book or box with imperfect circles on it near the doctor. It just shows that Jane and Rob weren't just sitting around navel-gazing. They were actively trying to verify this phenomenon with real people hundreds of miles away in real time.
Okay, so we've covered the net of awareness, we've covered the envelope experiment, but now we really need to shift gears completely. We need to stop talking about psychic games and start talking about, well, us, our physical bodies.
Yes, this is the heavy hitter of session 243, the subconscious bargain.
So Rob, the guy taking all the notes, he's been sick lately. He's been battling this nasty virus. And like any of us, he probably just thinks, man, I caught a bug at the store. Bad luck.
That is the standard conventional worldview, germ theory. You walk outside, a microscopic germ hits you, you get sick, it's totally random, and you're the victim of it.
But Seth basically stops the session and says, Rob, this isn't random at all. You did this to yourself on purpose.
He calls it a subconscious bargain.
Can we pause on that for a second? Because that is a really challenging, almost offensive idea to some people. Why on earth would anyone actively bargain to have the flu? Being sick is miserable. You feel weak, your joints ache, your nose runs. What is the possible upside to that?
You have to think of it as a transaction. Seth explains that Rob subconsciously agreed to be sick during the winter, specifically the months of January through March, in exchange for relative freedom and good health the entire rest of the year.
So he's essentially trading 3 months of misery for 9 months of peace.
In a way, yes. But the psychology of it goes much deeper. Seth points out that Rob heavily associates the concept of spring with March 21st, which happens to be the exact date of this session. So the illness had to happen before this date. It was a literal biological deadline he set for himself.
But why did he need the downtime? What was he avoiding?
This brings us right into the classic psychology of the starving artist.
Ah, okay.
Rob had recently left a high-paying, very secure job in the commercial comic book industry to become a fine art painter.
That's a bold move.
A brave move, but a profoundly terrifying one. Fine art painting didn't pay the bills like the commercial comics did. He was under immense, crushing financial pressure. Seth says Rob was essentially striking out at himself.
So he was angry.
He was furious. He was resentful of the outside world for not buying his paintings, and he was resentful of himself for leaving the safety of his old job. Seth points out that Rob would purposefully sit and listen to bad news on the radio just to feel a perverse pleasure in his own misery.
Wow. That is Seth really calling him out.
It's brutal love. Seth tells him directly, you were caught between two reactions. One, resentment against the world. The other was to hurt yourself.
So the sickness actually serves a very specific function. If I'm sick, like really sick in bed, I can't paint. And if I can't paint, I can't fail.
Exactly. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah.
You can say, well, I would be a successful artist right now, but I've been so horribly ill this winter. It validates the withdrawal from society. It turns the feeling of I'm struggling into I'm a victim of a virus.
That is a really hard pill to swallow for anyone. But Seth goes even further into this. He brings up the polio vaccine, and this is where we get into the whole nocebo effect.
Right. This is absolutely fascinating from a mind-body perspective. Seth claims that Rob activated the virus himself, but he links it directly to a negative suggestion planted by Rob's mother.
What exactly did his mom do?
She was highly fearful. Apparently, she had told him recently, you might get polio from the vaccine itself. She planted that deep seed of fear in his subconscious.
This thing that is supposed to protect you might actually be the thing that kills you.
Exactly. Seth says, and I'll quote this, you activated it yourself. A negative suggestion given you by your mother allowed you to activate it.
So just to be completely clear here, Seth isn't saying the vaccine itself was medically dangerous.
No, not at all. He's saying the vaccine was biologically neutral or helpful. But Rob's belief, which was fueled by his mother's fear and his own deep-seated need to punish himself for his career choices, used the vaccine as a psychological trigger. He used that suggestion as an excuse to lower his own immunity.
That is the nocebo effect in a nutshell. The exact opposite of the placebo effect. If you believe a sugar pill will cure your headache, it often will. But if you deeply believe a harmless shot will sicken you, your body might actually manifest the physical symptoms of illness.
And because Rob was already desperately looking for a way to opt out of his immense financial stress, that suggestion from his mother was like a match thrown onto dry grass. He ignited the illness because, on a subconscious level, he needed the break it provided.
That really changes how you look at catching a cold, doesn't it?
It completely reframes it. It forces you to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. What does this illness actually do for me? Does it give me a much-needed break from a boss I can't stand? Does it force my partner to finally pay attention and take care of me?
It's a completely transactional view of human biology. I'll trade my health for some sympathy. Or I'll trade my vitality for a socially valid excuse to just lie in bed and rest.
And usually the terms of that deal are completely hidden from our conscious minds. We don't know we signed the contract. In this session, Seth is basically holding the signed contract up to Rob's face and saying, look, you signed this. You agreed to this.
Fortunately, Seth doesn't just leave Rob wallowing in his flu-ridden, financially stressed misery. He does offer some practical predictions, a little light at the end of the tunnel.
He does. He pivots to giving Rob some career advice. He tells Rob to take a trip to New York City. He says it will be very important for his art. And he predicts some major changes happening at Rob's old workplace.
Now, Rob is highly skeptical here. He's playing the role of the weary, beaten-down realist. He says something like, my boss has been there for 15 years. Nothing ever changes there.
Which is such a deeply human reaction. It's always been this way, so it will always be this way. Why even try? But Seth insists. He talks about upcoming management shifts or retirement, and he gives this piece of advice that I think applies to literally every freelancer or creative person listening right now.
What's the advice?
He suggests that Rob can get more money and more recognition, but only if he initiates it.
If he initiates it.
Rob was essentially sitting in his house waiting for the art world to come knock on his door. Seth is telling him, the variables in your reality are shifting. The door is finally unlocking. But you still have to walk up and push the handle yourself.
That's the kind of expert coaching we all need sometimes. We so often assume opportunities just don't exist simply because they haven't been handed to us on a silver platter.
Exactly. Seth is actively trying to move Rob from being a passive victim of fate and a victim of his own illness to being an active, conscious creator of his career and his physical reality.
And finally, there is one last little health nugget tucked in here, the hay fever forecast.
Right, Rob apparently suffered from terrible debilitating allergies every single summer.
And Seth calls this another psychological inheritance.
He tells Rob that his father gave him the hay fever when Rob was just 3 years old.
Here, son, have my blue eyes, and hey, take my crippling pollen allergies while you're at it.
It sounds funny when you put it that way, but children constantly mimic their parents' physical reactions as a way to bond with them. If dad violently sneezes every time the spring pollen comes out, and I'm a toddler who wants to be exactly like dad, I might subconsciously start sneezing too. It's a form of deep biological empathy.
But Seth predicts that Rob will actually have good health in the late summer this year, which is his usual allergy season, specifically because he is finally breaking that psychological link to his father. He's finally realizing, wait a minute, this allergy isn't actually mine. I don't have to carry this baggage anymore.
Which brilliantly brings us right back to that chilling word from the very beginning of the episode, mine.
Oh, wow. That is a really nice connection.
Rob had made the illness his. It was mine. But once he consciously understood the subconscious bargain he made, he could finally let it go.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. I mean, we've gone from missing friends and randomly guessing MSG to psychic nets, dark hallway doors, and the deeply financial roots of catching the flu.
It is an incredibly dense session. 1966 was clearly a very busy year for Jane and Rob.
If we had to synthesize all of this, we had to boil this entire deep dive down to the absolute essentials for you listening. What are the big takeaways?
I think there are three main ones. First, perception is always a translation game. Whether it's a vivid dream, a sudden psychic hunch, or just a weird memory of a spilled drink, your brain is working overtime to turn inner data, the raw code, into outer data, the desktop icon.
And we really have to be forgiving of the glitches in that system. The green receipt might show up looking white in your mind's eye, but the core message is still valid.
Exactly. Second, we are constantly fishing. That net of awareness Seth talks about isn't just for gifted mediums and trances. We're all constantly picking up on the moods of our coworkers, the unseen disturbances in the air. We just need to learn how to consciously check the catch.
And the third takeaway.
The subconscious bargain. This is the one that really sticks with me long after reading it. We are active participants in our own physical health. We make secret binding deals with our bodies. We trade our vitality for a temporary feeling of safety.
And that is exactly the provocative thought I want to leave you with today. I want you to really look at the last time you were sick, or even just the last time you felt completely drained and exhausted. Be honest with yourself and ask, was it really just a random bug? Or was it a bargain?
Are you actually catching a cold? Or are you just avoiding a deadline you're terrified of?
Oof, that hits hard. But it's an empowering question, right? Because if we are the ones who made the deal in the first place...
They're the ones who can break the deal. We can renegotiate the terms at any time.
Absolutely. Now, if this conversation sparked something in you, if you want to truly understand the nuts and bolts of how we create our own physical reality, you have to go straight to the source. We have barely scratched the surface of what's in session 243.
Please do. You really should visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com for its early sessions. Support the incredible work they do preserving this archive. Read the raw transcripts for yourself. I promise they are better than any summary we could ever give you.
And remember, this deep dive is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Keep throwing out your own net of awareness. Pay attention to the weird hits you get. You never know what you might catch out there in the dark.
Just watch out for the monosodium.
Exactly. Watch out for the MSG. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Stay curious.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.